We stop at a service station in the occupied...
This is this is in line with the Clarissa Ward coverage. Clarissa Ward was able to sneak into the Gaza Strip, and now CNN is not sneaking into, but actually offering coverage from the West Bank. Now, I have, for a long time now, I've talked about the Gaza Strip and how that death and devastation does not translate to empathy for Americans in the same way that the West Bank will, because we have no way to contextualize that level of ethnic cleansing and that level of violence. But because the operations in the West Bank are the regular maintenance of an apartheid regime, I think that it has the capacity for the Western world, like for people in the Western world, when they find out about what's going on in the West Bank, I think that they have an easier time identifying with it. Because the only time we see entire city blocks reduced to rubble is when it's happening far away in some brown nation, and it's either happening as a consequence of like other brown people doing it to the brown people, or it's a consequence of us doing it to the brown people. So we have no way of like looking at that and being able to like develop sympathy for those victims, because we're so used to seeing that in a manner that is depersonalized, in a manner that is like impossible to contextualize, impossible to understand. Did you forget Ukraine getting bombed? No, Ukraine is another example of this as well. Ukraine is the only time when you did see white people being victim to such a thing. And even then, entire city blocks wiped out happens there. It doesn't happen to us. That's my point. So like, we don't really see it. We don't have a way of consistently feeling like this is an ongoing atrocity that we have to do something about, in the way that we can see the personalized violence of the daily maintenance of the apartheid regime. And during the Ukraine bombings, everyone, yes, like Ozora is saying here, during the Ukraine bombings, everyone reiterated the uncivilized Eastern Europe sentiments, but even so, they also mentioned how unique this was, because it was white people who were victim to this kind of thing. So they kept saying, oh my God, this doesn't happen. This is not supposed to happen in Europe. This is not supposed to happen here. This is Europe. But the point is, it's just like Americans and people in the Western world can't comprehend entire city blocks being wiped out, but they can understand an apartheid regime.
By Palestinian West Bank, a man in military fatigues demands to check our IDs.
I have the right to secure this area.
What you're saying is kind of accurate to a testimony of an IDF vet. I remember he said he was more traumatized by a specific house raid in West Bank than actually being in Gaza in 2014. Well, for the IDF, I've seen conflicting reports on that. I've actually seen a lot of breaking the silence vets report that like going into Gaza actually made them realize like, oh, what we're doing here is unacceptable. Obviously, like air missions is a little different, but when you actually do boots on the ground warfare, when you actually put the military inside of Gaza, that genuinely changes people's minds. But you are correct. A lot of veterans report like their operations in the West Bank breaking their brains and causing them to really reconsider the apartheid, because at that point, you're literally doing this towards a population that is just straight up a civilian population. Not to say that Gaza isn't a civilian population, but everyone is primed to say Gaza is Hamas, Gaza are terrorists, the children are terror babies, right? Like there is this constant recycling of the racial agitated propaganda that plays a significant role in people dehumanizing their victims, both the IDF itself, but also just like people watching from afar. But yeah, this corresponds to testimonies that I read that the conflicts in Gaza are far more traumatic for soldiers on the ground due to the sheer violence, for sure. But I think it's like the daily maintenance of the apartheid against like a civilian population that's just trying to live, not even resisting against you, in the same way that at least Gaza has some structure of like a standing military, some semblance of a standing military that has an interest and is willing to and is successfully at times defending from belligerent occupiers.
I need to check who you are and what you're doing here.
He has no identifying insignia, won't tell us who he is, but he's got a gun. So we oblige.
Like,
We're confused.
This is so American, which is ironic because there's a ton of American scumbags that are settling in the West Bank anyway. But why is this so American? It's because this guy might not fucking be an actual military member. He might just simply be a militia that is now ordained by Itamar Ben-Gvir and the like to conduct what he believes is a military operation, in many instances without any sort of real training whatsoever. It's just a dude with a gun wearing military fatigues at a gas station. And if you and Americans can understand that, is what I'm trying to say. Americans that cannot associate in their minds with like being victim to a brutal assault by a belligerent occupier can totally understand and totally feel the fear of a dude dressed up in military fatigues with a assault rifle on his chest. That's something that you can totally get, right? We got our own Navy SEALs brigades out here doing similar shit.
The only ones. CNN obtained this video from inside Hebron, a divided city, filmed a few days after the Hamas October 7 attack.
He goes, "You're not a soldier."
The Palestinian man won't comply. He says he recognizes the man with the gun as a settler, not a soldier. In this tense climate, if a soldier issues an order, you comply. But is everyone with a gun and fatigues a soldier? The West Bank is under Israeli military occupation. It's also believed to be home to almost 750,000 settlers.
Very important for CNN audiences to see this reality, for the record. Yeah, these guys are basically the Klan. I mean, not even basically, they are the Klan. It seems weird because when you think about it, like when you see the Star of David painted outside of a home in the United States of America, that often spells trouble. That probably means like, you know, you're going to do a hate crime, an anti-Semitic hate crime. When you see a Star of David painted outside of a house, graffitied outside of a house in the West Bank, it's actually the settlers that are actually targeting that house, that they are going to do a hate crime to the Palestinians living there. It has the exact opposite indication. They mark it so they can blow up the fucking house, so they can throw Molotov cocktails and like light the house on fire and try to get the people out of that house so they can inevitably settle in it. So that dynamic, I think, is important for people to recognize because like if you grow up in America, you understandably recognize and you're trained to see anti-Semitism, especially if you're in progressive circles, right? And Jews are a marginalized group of individuals. Anti-Semitism is a very real bigotry, right? So it's the entire opposite way in Israel because the Israeli citizens, Israeli Jewish citizens specifically, those who live in the West Bank, are the occupying power. They're the occupying power. They are deliberately the majority in many places. And they are engaging in an act of settler terrorism, settler violence. So comprehending or looking at what happens in Israel with a Western lens oftentimes causes people to not really understand what's going on. Always carry that example that I just gave you with you whenever you think about that. The Star of David being painted outside of a house in the United States of America oftentimes implies that an anti-Semitic hate crime is about to happen. A Star of David painted outside of a house in the West Bank is the exact opposite. It means that a Jewish supremacist militia is going to come and try to forcibly take a Palestinian family out of their homes. The exact other way around.
Israeli civilians living in the occupied territories. Settlers consider this part of their biblical homeland and are expanding into Palestinian territories, even though the UN Security Council considers their presence illegal. Yet settlers are integral to Israel's security plan in the occupied territories, as Israel Defense Force reservists and settlement security squads.
Yeah, these are the people that are getting armed by Itamar Ben-Gvir. These are the people that are getting the fatigues and the helmets and the armor by Itamar Ben-Gvir at a time when the Israeli reservists have reported not having enough of the gear that they need when they're going into Gaza. So just understand like the genuine intention, the interest that the Israeli government has and how they manage their own limited resources.
Says the security threats in settlements, towns, and villages. Palestinians told CNN they consider armed settlers a greater threat than ever before. In the Palestinian village of Tuwani, where there's a settlement at the top of the hill, In this video, you see men in military fatigues. The IDF equips both civilian settler security squads and soldiers in the region. As you can see here, it's almost impossible to differentiate. CNN shared the images we gathered in the West Bank with a senior IDF official who was unable to tell us who here is in the IDF and who is not. We asked how then are Palestinians expected to differentiate. The official told CNN there have been cases of reservists who did not act in accordance with army standards, adding there is no place in the IDF for such
there's
behavior.
obviously the case, the famous case of the settler that shot the other dude, the former cop too. I don't know if they'll mention this. I gotta pee.
Case that breaches army standards will be investigated. Settlers have heavyweight support in Israel's far-right government. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Minister for National Security, settler. After the Hamas October 7 attack, Ben-Gvir loosened gun permit regulations, making it easier for tens of thousands of Israeli civilians to bear arms. Bezalel Smotrich, Minister of Finance, settler. Also post-attack, pushed through over $100 million for West Bank security, including funds for training and equipping settler security squads. But it's not just arming and equipping. We witnessed firsthand some of the restrictions the IDF impose on Palestinians. Ihtidal's house is not even 5 minutes away from the other side of this checkpoint, but she can't get through.
Every day they tell her to go back, and every day she has to do this extraordinarily long loop to try and get in. She stood there.
So here's the interesting phenomena. In a lot of instances, a lot of the settlers that are getting these guns are not even trained. When they had to do mandatory military service in the IDF, they got a religious exemption. Now, without the military training, they get the guns specifically so they can level up on their harassment and ethnic cleansing operation.
They are intentionally making it difficult for us, making so we have to cross through areas that are hostile to us to get to our homes.
Ihtidal picks up a few more things before she sets off home, but not too many. It's a long walk uphill. Since the 1990s, the city of Hebron has seen many curfews. The day we visited, there was a curfew in place from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Ihtidal has to go through this checkpoint. Palestinians have to be searched. Settlers aren't normally checked. Ihtidal has to walk. Settlers can drive. Palestinians need permission for visitors. Settlers don't. The IDF says all these measures are in accordance with their security assessments to provide security for all residents. Settlers and Palestinians live side by side, but the rules for each are very different. Faiza and her husband have lived in this house for 14 years. They inherited it from her husband's grandparents. Their house is overlooked by an IDF sentry post, yet they fear for their safety.
This scene is so inappropriate and depressing for our home. You can see up here what we've had to put in place to protect ourselves from the settlers.
As we leave Faiza's house, we get stopped by an Israeli soldier. He says we're not allowed to walk along the main road. We have to go back to the checkpoint to be searched again because we've been inside a Palestinian home.
I would just point out a lack of logic, which is that these Palestinian houses, the Palestinians have come through that checkpoint, so they can't have possibly brought in anything.
Sorry, just so I can understand. Just so I can understand. Yeah. I'm really confused, as usual.
So, even though we went through that checkpoint,
yeah.
Because we have been in the house of Palestinians, we now have to go jumping over people's garden walls.
So we can't walk on the street.
We can't go straight down.
Come back.
If you would go through the checkpoint and you stay here, it's great. But if as soon as you move from different areas,
yes.
So you need to get
Now
rechecked.
do you understand it?
Oh.
Yes. So we need to get rechecked. So we're going to the route.
Stay enough for next time.
Come on. Okay. Let's just go. Thank you. We'll see you in a bit.
See you soon.
But we can't get down. The access to the garden is closed.
Damn, he's so nice, bro. That's a common regional accent. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, that Israeli occupying force soldier is demonstrating the common regional dialect and accent of Bondi. Yeah. Which is, of course, I mean, he's showing once again, he's just like, obviously, thousands of years this dude has lived in this historic land, clearly. And certainly not doing f***ing apartheid.
So the path I can see is the
Mother was like, Adelaide, good day, mate. How you doing? Right. How you f***ing doing, right? I'm doing a apartheid state, mate. What do you mean? Yeah, I'm a sick cunt.
But if you can see when I can't.
We can't walk on the street because we've been in a Palestinian house, and now we're deemed a security risk. So we're stuck. Eventually, the soldier has to call into his superior.
It's just so sad, because like, under every other circumstance, you would celebrate a thing like this. You would celebrate that, like, any other country, any other circumstance, if you see a dude with a Australian accent speaking to you in English and is like, yeah, I'm Turkish, mate. Right. My family. There's a lot of Turkish people that went to Australia as well. Yeah. I saw the Anzac War. And then I thought, nice beaches, mate. That's what my parents said. You would look at that situation and you go, oh, that's sick. This is the one instance where it's a threatening presence because he's there, he has a gun, and his job is to tell you to literally go and f*** off and go back to the goddamn checkpoint and then come back and jump through like backyards and shit. It's just like unimaginable, man.
To give us special permission to walk on the main road.
Thank you so much.
We head out and back through the checkpoint where we're searched again. A tiny glimpse into what Palestinians navigate every day. The UN says that post-October 7th, over 1,000 Palestinians in the West Bank have been displaced.
By the way, I've seen so much coverage on this. This is the first time I've seen a dude unironically be kind to a Western journalist. I know that they're like, they obviously dial it back in the presence of cameras, but never actually like openly kind. I guess that's the difference with CNN.
Forced from home by security restrictions and settler violence. The US and UK are now sanctioning extreme settlers, but Palestinians say it's not enough. Not when settlers can cloak themselves in the authority of the Israeli state. Nima Elbagir, CNN, Hebron.
He was polite, not kind. True. But usually you don't see that. Not even to Americans. I mean, we saw the other day, they beat the shit out of Anadolu Ajans journalist in the West Bank. Here's some interesting stuff going on. U.S. to restrict visas of Israeli settlers over attacks in occupied West Bank.
The U.S. has announced sanctions on several dozen Israeli settlers involved in attacks against...
Several dozen? First of all, there's like 75,000 plus Americans that are settlers themselves. Sanction them across the board. They are in violation of the international law. Halt! You have violated international law. What do you mean several dozen? Immediately be like, we're taking your passport away unless you come back to Brooklyn right now, bitch. You better come back to Long Island or else you are not allowed to come back at all. 75,000 plus. Are you kidding me? Those are just the Americans. Get the out of here. Come on now.
Against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. There's been a surge in violence since Israel began its war on October the 7th. In recent days, Israeli settlers raided a restaurant and launched an attack on a Palestinian father of 6.
Yeah, I'd be up in there like, halt. You have violated the law. Your stolen goods are now forfeited. That's what I would say to the American settlers in Israel.
The U.S. State Department is announcing sanctions on several dozen Israeli settlers involved in attacks against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Let's get more from our White House.
Then pay with your blood. Anyway.
Correspondent Kimberly Halkett joins us now live from Washington, D.C. So, Kimberly, according to UN experts, human rights groups, all settlements are illegal under international law. Is the U.S. targeting settlers and settler groups in general or specific individuals?
Yeah, this, according to the Secretary of State in his statement that has just come down, would be targeting individuals.
I used to be a settler like you, but then I took stone to the knee. Okay, we got to stop. Okay. For those of you who don't know, we're making Elder Scroll memes. That's so crazy. People in this chat might not have even been alive at this point. You know what I mean?
under the authorities of the United States. Those who are not of U.S. citizenship and wish to travel to the United States, if they are affected by these visa restrictions, would in fact be prevented from traveling to the United States. Now, this, according to the Secretary of State, is after many warnings. The United States has decided to use its authorities because it is the view of the Blinken administration that the Israeli government is simply not doing enough to prevent the violent acts committed by Israeli settlers in the West Bank against Palestinians. And so in order to prevent that violence, and after repeated warnings, the Biden administration decided to take matters into its own hands and do what it could.
The Blinken administration, I mean, it's true.
With the tools that it had. And so the Secretary of State in his statement says these attacks are unacceptable, and as a result is announcing these new visa restriction policies against dozens of individuals who undermine peace, security, and stability in the West Bank.
Kimberly, how is this impacting US-Israel relations, given that some of the members of the Israeli cabinet are settlers who've given their backing to some of the violent settlers?
Yeah, well, in terms of relations, U.S. and Israeli relations, it doesn't appear that the Biden administration is particularly concerned about that right now, given the fact that there are such high civilian casualties, particularly in Gaza. We have seen all kinds of demonstrations outside the White House. There has been international outcry. There has been global demonstrations. There has even been pressure within the Biden administration. There have been letters that have been sent, open letters. There have even been resignations. And the President Joe Biden's feeling the heat. We've even seen movements such as the Abandon Biden movement in some swing states organized by prominent Muslim leaders. In other words, for a president who is trying to win re-election in about a year's time or less than a year now.
This is why I've been saying, do not stop the pressure campaign. We do play a role here. We do play a significant role here, way more than you would expect. That the constant, consistent pressure against the Brandon camp unironically is working. It has to work. America is, at the end of the day, theoretically a democracy. Don't say false. Shut the fuck up. Don't say false. It does work. It is working. It's working in ways that you cannot comprehend. That's why I get so mad at people who say shut the fuck up and vote. The idea that your protest and your pressure campaign is not working is also just as defeatist as the other side. People say shut the fuck up and vote, and then people also say, well, you know, shut the fuck up. Your protests don't matter. Okay, well, you're two sides of the same coin then.
Now, he's thinking about that. He's got domestic concerns. He's not worried about, settlers on the cabinet or what the Knesset thinks right now and how that might play out. What he's thinking about is how he's going to win re-election and what that might look like. So this...
Dude. This is a point that is impossible to shake America off of. It is America's foreign policy that we're talking about. You're out of your mind if you think that like it's going to be that easy to just go, all right, I guess a lot of people are upset. Time to just do a 180. We're good guys now. That's never going to happen. A lot of you are, I think, young and don't really understand what the landscape looked like for Palestinian liberation. There was no mention of even pro-Palestinian sentiment. There's nothing. That is not like this is a completely new phenomena. So of course it's going to take a long time to shake these geriatric souls off of their calcified positions. It's going to take a long time. It's something that you just have to keep doing.
This is part and parcel of what this policy is responding to that pressure and taking action. And so that is what the U.S. president has done. But it shouldn't come as a big surprise, given the fact that he wrote an op-ed in just recent weeks in response to the spike in attacks on Palestinians, telegraphing this is exactly what he was going to do.
All right, let's thank Kimberly Halkett, but let's continue.
allies of Israel condemned a sharp rise in attacks on Palestinian civilians by Jews who are armed and who've settled in the West Bank, the other Palestinian territory, along with Gaza, which has been occupied by Israel. Religious Jews believe the land was given to them by God, and leaders of the settlers say they are protecting themselves.
Come on, dog. This is huge. This is huge stuff. On the motherfucking BBC nonetheless. Get out of here. This is good stuff. Straight up. I'll say it. I'm walking here, chat. I'm walking here. Time to go on a walk again. It's been a long time since I've done this, but okay. So I did want to talk about that. I did want to talk about the talked about like the pressure mounting against Israel, and like America even symbolically taking an approach like this is good. Ultimately, it's a good thing, not a bad one, you know? There's so much more to talk about, however.